So our final panel of the symposium will focus on executing day-to-day program needs and sustainment and modernization. It's my pleasure to introduce Colonel William Storms. He's the Director, Minuteman III Systems Director at Hill Air Force Base, Utah. As the Senior Material Leader, he's responsible for more than $22.5 billion in acquisition and sustainment efforts to ensure 400 combat-capable nuclear missiles are safe, secure, and effective. The Minuteman III Systems Directorate has more than 900 military, civilian, and support contractors spread across 9 different Air Force bases. Prior to assuming his current position, Colonel Storms was Deputy Director, Aerospace Systems Directorate, Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Colonel Storms is joined by Captain Pat Crowley, Technical Director, Navy Strategic Systems Programs. He enlisted in the Navy in 1990, and after qualifying as a nuclear power plant electrician's mate, that's just an impressive title, you know. He was stationed on the USS Arkansas. He graduated from Tulane University with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and commissioned as a submarine warfare officer, engineering duty option in 1996. He assumed the duties in April 2022 as SSP's 19th Technical Director. As the overall weapons system manager, SP20 plans, directs, and coordinates research, design, development, procurement, test, installation, maintenance, repair, alteration, safety, fleet support, and disposal of the Trident II weapons system for the United States and the United Kingdom. He serves as the Deputy DRPM and is responsible for the assigned weapon system program execution, including budgeting, execution, and full life cycle support. So I welcome you both to the panel, and kind of what we had kind of chatted about a little bit was for both of you to kind of talk about what does it take day to day to keep your capability moving forward. And I'll kind of flip a coin and okay, it hit the ground. I don't know if it landed heads or tails. So why don't you fire away, sir?
All right, thanks. Well, so keep the program going day to day. You need a lot of good people who know what they're doing. I mean, that's the answer, right? Hopefully, Admiral Wolf touched on the people piece a lot, right? Because that's what he drills into my head. So, right, in the grand scheme of things, right, we're doing the nuclear modernization, but the Navy has to do it in stages because we have a lot to modernize after a while. So even though, you know, Columbia is the new missile submarine that a lot of people are focused on, Ohio, some people seem to forget, just finished the last refueling overhaul of the class, so now that ship will be able to be deployed for 20 years. So we have to support the Ohio system till 2042 out there on deployment until replaced by Columbia, right? And we have modernized the strategic weapon system with the life extension program to be out there for the life of the hull. So it was interesting meeting and talking to Colonel Storms here yesterday because we were comparing some of those day-to-day things, challenges that we have, and they're incredibly similar. So when you're doing the sustainment, right, there's scary words people use like cyber, right? How do you know you're cyber safe? In some ways it's easy because, right, there is not, you know, if they are programming the malware in Fortran, I could be in trouble if not, right? But there are things that we're both producing off of production lines because what sustainment still has production elements involved and some minor modernization to keep things. So those are the things that, you know, it's interesting to compare notes to. But the also is the draw that I think, you know, some of the panel talked to about all this great mission and great work coming to it. And so as people are very intrigued about our LE2 weapon system that we're designing or the common missile compartment building and delivering to the UK and the Mark 7, the W93 Mark 7 program, right, there's a lot to still do and learn on the deployed weapon system. So keeping people focused on what is deployed every single day, right, when you're battling the war for talent and everyone wants to do some of the new stuff is kind of the challenge. But that's just really about explaining to people. And I think that the secret in doing that is some things that when they're on the outside and they're looking at what they think they're interested in and they see some of the new stuff, which I get to sell them on, when I get them in, when I show them how cool it is to just go on a submarine and say, all we have to do is that sailor right there that has a problem today, right? And you're the person who cares about what he says, right? And you just meet the person who has to support him with the warfighter, and that is the best trick I have to handle the day-to-day work, which is daunting, never-ending, But as I forgot who said, is we have the mission, right? And with that on your side, you could motivate a lot of people. So I'll just leave it there. That is what I focus on, is really getting the people tied to the mission, right? And then trying to make sure people don't forget that there's a great modernization program that that we're doing even inside of SSP, and so it's a great draw. But we can't forget that we need to sustain the weapons system and the Ohio-class submarines and our UK partner over there that helps us and leverages, and then we help leverage over there to make us strong. So I'd say that's what I spend my day on, is mostly people, and the technical stuff is hard, but we somehow fit that into.
I don't think. Sounds like it's on, even though it's not lit up, sorry. So people and parts, I think, are probably the two main focuses we have. And on the people front, with Sentinel coming down the road, I get asked a lot by our workforce of when should we start thinking about, transitioning to a different job? And then I look at the person in their, mid-40s, maybe 50, and I go, you're going to be able to retire on Minuteman III, right? We're 15 years at least from Minuteman III being off alert and fully out of the field. And so that's like our big focus, is that, like, hey, look, like, there is a lot of life that this program still needs to lead, and we need all the people that we have that have the knowledge. We need new people that are coming on board that need to gain that knowledge as we attrit those people, but definitely the people that are on the mission today need to stay on the mission, and we need to be able to pull people into this program, because, yeah, it's not the sweetest, sexiest, newest thing, but it is the operational thing that we need, and we will need it until we turn the lights out. So there's no stopping. And then the parts piece, kind of the same thing, right? This is an old weapon system. I've been asked how much margin we have left in Minuteman III, and I'll tell you, you look at a reliability bathtub curve, we are on the far right side. I can't tell you exactly where we are, but we are experiencing end-of-life failures with this system today. And the only way we're keeping it operational is by fixing and replacing all those parts. And when we run into problems is when the industrial base for that piece or part doesn't exist anymore. Hopefully we have the drawings. If we don't, then we got to go reverse engineer, right? And those are the challenges that we're facing on a daily basis. The people that we have been through it. They're skilled. The organization that I'm honored to lead has been doing this for a long time. They know what they're doing. The supply chain management group knows what they're doing. The 309th Missile Maintenance Group provides our depot support. They know what they're doing. But we've got to keep the people in all those organizations present, engaged, and focused on the operational system while the other systems come to catch up with us, become operational, and take the mission over from us.
Great. We look at how the system was put together 50 years ago, which it was impressive. And what's going on now to sustain it is impressive. As you are the leaders of the two organizations kind of moving things forward with your bosses, if you look, let's just say 5 years down the road, and just say, here, the two things that I hope my team doesn't have to do anymore, because I've improved processes, or I've changed processes, or I've worked with my industry partners to develop something that kind of helps move some rocks out of the way, what might those be? And the reason I ask is because if it's on your mind as to how I kind of need to do better, most of the people out here in this audience are the folks that, kind of try and help get there. So with that, you can answer, or I can move on. So.
Well, it might sound a little thing, but, if you ask what the people, I think what gets them, frustrated, because, just giving them access to the tools and that they need to do their job. So, right, battling the admin battle to being able to do your job, right? And we do so well at separating our people from each other. I see the Russians, Chinese, and others as adversaries, but I think if you look what we spend our time doing, we many times try to battle those boundaries we put between in front of people, and that is going to frustrate people to the point where if they're deciding, maybe I didn't have a good day, right, how do I get to that, that right, kind of, is it worth it? And so hopefully, really it's battling the IT. So I have the IT resources, whatever, we have all the clearances we need. right? We could get through all the need to know, that's easy. Can we get through the IT and the pieces of paper so people could actually, talk to each other and do their work? I mean, just even whether it's cross-service, cross-program, to contractors, all the things we put into base. So if we make those parts easier, right, and leadership actually takes on and takes some risk with some of that paperwork, we could actually better associate the people to the work, and they could actually not be looking for other things to go do.
I don't know that there's anything that I would say we need to stop doing, but maybe things that we could do a little bit more efficiently. One of the things that tends to bog us down is, we're directly supporting the missile wings that are in the field, running this system every day. Without them, obviously, the system doesn't mean anything. But their voice goes through so many filters to get to us oftentimes that sometimes I think things would be a lot quicker and better for the folks if the lines of communications between the wings and us were better. We're getting there. Colonel Little and I spent some pretty good time together. I think it was last week. It's all kind of blending together at this point to get after that somewhat. And, we've got people at each of the missile wings, but still the big picture items get watered down. They get kind of slowed down and stuck in the command staff that we deal with. If we could move some of those barriers, I think it'd be a little bit better.
Great. When we talk about keeping your weapon system effective, and you kind of think of what you need to do that, how does your organization ensure that you keep your weapon system effective? We can start with Minuteman.
I was going to say I was going to go because I've had him go first both times. I figured it was my turn. But, we've got the weapon system broken down into roughly 1,100 kind of different subsystems, for lack of a better term. And annually we go through that and we review each one of those subsystems and understand and assign a risk level to that piece part assembly to understand how we think that thing is going to act over the next year. And it sets kind of our battle rhythm for the year. We define those, right, low, medium, high risk, and we go through all that, and we've got a very structured process to do that. There's flexibility in that process to adjust when something pops up, because something will pop up. That gets back to the end-of-life piece that I'm talking about, is things are breaking in new and clever ways, and they're not things that you would normally look at and go, hey, I think that's about to fail, we should probably fix it, right? So we've got a very structured process to do that, and again, right, it goes back to the people that understand that process. They've got the technical expertise. They will dig down and look and understand what the failure mechanisms are, and we'll get ahead of that. And we'll determine, is this something that we can repair at the depot? Is this something that we need to just go through the supply chain and order new to have extra stock on the shelves? Do we need to increase the demand in some way? We work hand in hand with the supply chain management group, DLA, to understand what their demand signals are, because they're different. They need a clear demand signal. We have some parts that have never been touched for the life of the weapon system, and so there's zero sitting on the shelf. There's no requirement for them to have them on the shelf, and then all of a sudden it breaks, and now we got to play catch up. So we're constantly monitoring, looking at that process to understand what those items are, so we can then find ways that we can help our partners communicate to their leadership so they can get the funding to put those things on the shelves. And so we do it by managing that risk, and we're trying to get more predictive by a whole slew of things. We have our operational test launches that give us insight into the reliability, the accuracy of the weapon. We also have different various surveillance tests that we do, aging and surveillance testing that we do on certain critical pieces and components. And so we have all that information, we put it together, we come up with our list of things that we want to look at. Last year it was the filthy 15. This year we have 16, which you can't do filthy 15, you can't do dirty dozen. Somebody suggested sweet 16, but that's like a positive thing. So it's just 16 right now. It's the health of the fleet is the process that we call it. But we'll have to come up with something. I even tried ChatGPT for words like to make 16 sound bad, and there wasn't anything. So we broke the internet, I think, with this one.
Sir.
So you're 33 since trying to IOC. I think we have a good recipe to keep it effective. We have some minor modernization programs. We keep touching things, right? But I think what we need to worry about is staying relevant, right? And so when big challenges come up and people say maybe we need a different solution for a different threat or different environment, people go to like LE2 or Mark 7, but I think we have a weapon system right in front of us that it may not be easy to modify, but it could be the answer, right? And so I think that's where we have to stay relevant. We have to look not only to the future, but what can we do with what we have, right? And how can we go and now help exercise the skill sets. But the other part of relevancy is capacity. We have downsized the industrial base, our factories, our size. I mean, we only filled, 20 tubes of the 24 for New Start treaty limits, right? But we're sized to fit exactly what we need, right? And what if we need is more, right? What if we now have 2 adversaries, right? And so I think capacity and relevancy is what we need to worry about right now, and some of the other things we could worry about with some of the new modernized systems.
I've got like 100 questions in my head, but I'm going to stop and look out here and see if somebody has any questions in their heads. Over here.
Some big things that been coming up today is modernization, people, and speed or urgency. So with us moving forward into the future, I just wanted to ask the panel, what is their approach to not only innovating and maintaining what we have right now, but also maintaining the health of the workforce, so to prevent burnout and things like that?
Well, I think health of the workforce, right? I think there's I try to talk about how to give someone, maybe not in a traditional sense, and when you have a very traditional organizations, people have expectations of, I need this engineer with 20 years of experience. And I'm like, great, doesn't exist. Now what are we gonna do? Right, and so, right, the health of the workforce, right, I think we have to think differently. I think the health of the workforce we need, I'm like, what if you hire someone right out of college and we let them, right, now's the time, because we're not in we're not at major weapon system development, but we will be there in the Navy for, and before we know it, right now's the time to take some risk and learn. So when I think of health of the workforce, it's that whole, what heard the previous panel, like how do you get the interns? How do you get people involved in DoD? How do you get people, even if I lose them, teach them a few, and then I lose them to someone else, right? We'll see them back, right? We get some good help, people going between NSA and Navy SSP or vice versa, right? So I think the health of the workforce I worry about a lot, and I just try to push people to not try to measure health in how do I get what I had when I was here 10 years ago, but how do I grow the capacity so that the people will be there, just in time for the work to be there. So that's one approach I've been using lately, but I'm sure there's about 10 other dimensions to that that's important, or we'll all fail.
Yeah, so we have a whole section called the NMU, the NM because it's our office symbol, and then university for the U, and we're structuring that and focusing that on how we grow the talent that we need. It's about building the bench, succession planning, but not from an individual perspective, but so, make sure all of our engineers are postured to be the next chief engineer, or at least on the path to be a chief engineer somewhere. We're working to reach out across the base because there are other organizations that are not Nuclear Weapons Center at Hill, and how we can, get people to move into some of these other positions so they get the different experiences that we need, and then pull them back at the right time to get them in. And so, burnout is an issue when in deployed environments, right? We call it complacency. We're dealing with a lot of things. There is a lot of 202s and other ETARs, emergency. Anyway, like stuff that the field's coming to us with and saying, hey, like this isn't working in the system. What's the deal? Can we do this instead of this? Like those kinds of things. And our engineers are being buried in these documents. And so one of the real big pushes that we're doing to try to help with that is to just talk about complacency, help come up with some established processes and procedures that help triage those things. So the thing that comes in with all 100 of the others, the worker who's looked at 50 of them today realizes like, hey, this one is actually important because it's a direct tie to a key turn and a missile leaving versus this other one that's really just, a screws broke on a bookshelf, which could be an issue, but not like, going to impact our operations today. And so we're working to communicate that better. We're working to try to make sure we're balancing workload correctly across the organization, because over time, we add a bunch of people to one area that was important, and then as that kind of problem gets solved, another area will pop up, and so we add people there. but we probably didn't take the people down from the other area, and so we've stressed a smaller group of people with the new problem, and so we got to make sure we're balancing the load across, and that all gets to human capital management, right, talent management, whatever you want to call it, and we're working to come up with some of those things better, because we haven't been doing it well.
Anyone else? So the next question I've had has been around for quite some time, and the different PEOs, directors, and SMLs and technical directors have, kind of thought it through and addressed it differently. As you learn more and more about each other's weapon system, because we are talking more than we used to, okay? Where do you see leverage points that we've now taken advantage of? And then where do you think we need to talk a little bit more about a couple of these either processes or facilities or wherever it may be, where maybe we can leverage a little bit of the efforts going on there and benefit more between the two weapon systems?
Well, for me, I think it was December, I took a trip to Navy Crane, right, which is one of your kind of centers of excellence for a lot of stuff, and it's really neat, right? The Navy's structured different than the Air Force, and the Air Force is structured different than the Navy. We do things differently, which is cool because then we actually have some capabilities that we can share. And in this case, the functions and the services that Navy Crane can do actually can help us quite a bit to get after some problems where we need. They provide really good reverse engineering capabilities. They've got some circuit card capabilities that are just amazing, and so that's one area I know for sure that I'm interested in leveraging more. We've got kind of funds set up with them to do some quick reaction stuff if we need to. So from that perspective, I think it's great, right? We're structured different, and we need to find those differences and understand how we can use them to our advantage.
And Joe, you're right. It is much different today, right? Instead of being proud of how you are doing it your way, now it's, well, what do you know about the other person and what can you share? So, but we're really there. We've moved a long ways, and I'm on a overarching steering group with Colonel Clegg for Sentinel and MDA, and we meet regularly, update the flag officers where we are actually today sharing facilities and helping each other and understanding our combined need. And we are, as the industry base knows, right? A lot of you have 2 or 3 customers. It's usually not just one part of this triad. And so we are definitely already working together for years on some of those things, right? Breaking down those barriers that's always been there, because there's just, we all have to be successful somehow. That also with the DOE, right? Really trying to optimize across the capacity of all of our facilities and time it right. And I thought it was really good for SSP to take on, right, if Sentinel's one of the first in the chute, right, some of my folks who are going to be behind Sentinel by about maybe 10 years, right, we could focus more on some of the factory level kind of modernization stuff as they're trying to deliver product right off the line. We could worry about some things in the future. So I think we're absolutely doing right now, today, doing about the best we could do to make sure that we understand where can we help each other, how can we support each other, where do we have combined need, and we have gone through several working groups, several sub-areas, but I think we found the niches that we find a lot of benefit, and now we just continue to leverage and push on, but I think we've broken down those barriers, and we're already basically doing that. But if anyone had other ideas, right, of, hey, I see the Navy doing this and the Air Force doing this, and we could do it better together, and I'd love to talk to you, because that's just, we just don't know. It's not that we're unwilling.
So if a lot of folks watched the SpaceX launch, a week ago, and I think if I have it right, they had what they call a RUD, a rapid unscheduled disassembly. They don't call it an explosion. It's a rapid unscheduled disassembly. We talked today a little bit about risk and people being risk adverse because of failure. Okay? In kind of your mind, and you talk to your team, if you have a flight test failure, right, and I commanded the range of Vandenberg, and we had to blow up a few, what I saw some commanders do was go to their team and say, okay, we're going to figure out what went wrong, and I never heard a lot of the real effective ones say, we're going to figure out what we did wrong. That'll come. But it was more about, let's figure out what went wrong And then if there's something we need to change, that's fine. And I always found that to be kind of an encouraging approach is, let's figure out what we learned from this. And so, when you look at your team and you know that they're heading out to do some risky stuff, how do you motivate them to kind of look past, hey, this may not work out the way we thought it would, but we're going to come out better for it. And it doesn't always have to just be on a flight test. It can be component development, whatever it may be. And so I guess where I'm at is, how do you talk to your team about, taking risk and accepting responsibility as a team or accepting responsibility as the leader?
So we've had some product deliveries recently on some new trucks. We'll just pick that one because it's an easy one. That just didn't meet the standard that they needed to meet. And so to me, right, it's not necessarily a deliberate conversation that says, hey, let's take risks smartly and do it. It's in the reactions and the day-to-day when bad news comes in, right? It's, well, how do you handle it? Do you ask questions? Or, everybody comes in and they're like, oh, sorry, that was my bad. Or, and I'm like, I don't really care whose fault this was, right? Like, we just need to understand what we did so we can, you just say it, right? You just say what you said, right? What went wrong? How can we apply this to our other programs? Where else in the organization are we doing similar things or not doing some of these things, and how do we get better for it? I think it's in the day-to-day and the small things, and then when the big things happen, right, we've already set the kind of the culture, the climate to address and handle those things.
So this is a big conversation in SSP because when you're trying to move from sustainment for so long to sustainment development, you got to do risk differently, right, in the future. And Admiral Wolf is very credible when he says, if you tell me what risk you're taking and it shows up, right, we don't have to dissect everything about it. We fix it and move on. But on the other side, right, we have to be honest. If we didn't know we were taking the risk and the risk bite you don't say after the fact, well, that's the risk we took because we went fast or we were out of money. Well, is that the risk you decided to take, or is that the one you find out? And those ones that we didn't decide to take, tell him about or tell the right level of leadership. We definitely go through, but we also go through it differently. A few years ago, after the Fukushima accident, Vice Admiral Benedict at the time says, how's that not exactly us? Right, that we think we've been doing it so long and we're successful, and right, we didn't actually think about what we're doing in a public risk technology. So we created what we called our high consequence events, and it's really to look at the human element weaknesses that are common in these events. So instead of just looking what happened in this one or what happened in this other industrial accident, so also not just look at your side, but look at the human element there, because that's the hard part and that keeps coming up. And then also sharing our failures, because we were always pretty insular and stuff like that. So we're learning to share. We're learning to evaluate how the human element plays a part in there, and how to make sure that we understand if you take risk, that's okay. We could have a failure. We'll move on. If no one knew you took a risk and it did something to you, you need to slow down and actually really have an introspective moment there. So those are the elements I think we're doing in practice. I think we got to do it about 100 more times before people will get it.
I got one more question, and then I'm just going to ask you, because you and especially Colonel Storms and I talk as much as we can about messaging. The importance of messaging. What's the messaging you're trying to get out there? And sometimes what's the messaging that you're trying to get out there and people just aren't getting it? But if you look at, and I'm not talking Sentinel, and I'm not talking, the next generation, whatever we're going to call it, D5, D6, whatever. When you look at how you're sustaining things now, how do you think sustainment's going to change in the future to where it's more efficient, more effective, insofar as processes with industry, or how we think through sustainment? Is there a better way to do sustainment? I mean, there's always a better way, but is there a better way to execute sustainment for systems that are going to come online down the road?
I'll go first.
Good, I'll steal your answer.
It's tough. The biggest problem, I think, that, I know this is probably more of an absolute statement than I intend to be, right, but one of the biggest challenges we run into is kind of fundamental understanding of the pieces and parts that are breaking, because we've lost it, right? This is an old system, and so the people that design the system, whether the contractor still exists or not, the individuals that worked that system and really understood how it worked, don't exist. And so we may have a drawing or we may not have a drawing, we may own the data, we may not own the data, but either way, the people that really truly understood it aren't there and don't know. So I really like the digital push. I really like the, owning the technical baseline. But so the thing that I would like to see in the future would be us as a government really embracing, at least the Air Force side, I know the Navy, again, does a little bit different than us, but like really truly embracing the technical understanding, owning the documentation and knowing what that looks like, and then keeping the people that know that around, or at least having a deliberate plan to transfer that knowledge to the next group of people that are going to have to do this, because whatever time we say the next system is going to age out, I'm living with a system fielded in 1970, and it's now 2023, and it had a 10-year life. Whatever we say it is today, it's not going to be, and we've got to be smarter in how we understand the technical pieces of the weapon system to help us be more efficient in sustainment in the future.
Sir?
So I think we have a pretty good model that we could be pretty successful in SSP, but we can't do the exact same thing. I mean, you get historic inflation, and it doesn't all filter down, and sustainment probably gets the last trickle, right? So we're going to be forced to change some things, and so leveraging some of the things that we're doing under the model-based system engineering that we're doing for development programs, but porting it over to sustainment, the way we get people to, instead of you do sustainment or development, you can do primary sustainment, but you're doing some of it over here, so you could bring that over, is what we're going to try to push on to explore, because we're going to have to do sustainment a little bit more thinner, because we're going to have to just work through this inflation. That is going to really be a big challenge. It is now, it's still going to be. And then the last one is the also at the operator side, right? We have saved money as we squeeze between on training, and the operators are less experienced, less trained, right? And we got to make sure that we provide training products that really, with the generations and how they like to learn and how they do, and we up our game and change the products to match the actual customer, who's the sailors, who are the 18-year-olds, and how they learn is not necessarily what worked for the people 20 years ago, but we really haven't spent the money in training. But that will pay dividends if we could find ways to invest in some of the training and those things to help actually do sustainment smoothly and understand what problems we have that are a system problem or what's really a training problem. So those are the two of the tackles that we're gonna have to do differently for the future to do well in sustainment.